Welcome to The Match. Meet the minds behind the work. Insights from the best specialist and independent agencies presented by Studio Space. Today we're talking about customer loyalty and customer loyalty as a commercial growth system. So not just loyalty programs, but more broadly, how organizations should think about driving long-term customer value and growth through loyalty. To have this conversation, we've got David Parsons, who is CEO at Ellipsis, joining us. Ellipsis are the customer loyalty experts. They work with leading banks, insurers, retailers, travel companies, and others to help them find, understand, measure, manage, and grow their customer value. So David, to kick us off, easy question for you. When you talk about loyalty, what do you actually mean by that in a business context?
Wow. Well, hi, Robin, and thanks for having me here. You could have started with a simpler question, but I'll take that one on. Look, loyalty is a fascinating word. It's a human word, like we see it and expect it in sort of human relationships, but it's really, it's everywhere you look in business now. Brands want better loyalty outcomes with their customers. And what that means is that they have higher lifetime value. They're worth more over time. A set of more valuable customers ultimately drives increase in asset value for a business. And that means that brands with higher levels of loyalty outperform their competitors when it comes to acquiring them, retaining them, and maximising the share of their spend. So if you're running a business and you say, I want a great loyalty outcome that means much more valuable customers, I think that's a good thing. And that's why maybe we're so busy helping lots of companies through their loyalty strategies.
Customer loyalty has always made complete business sense. It's an obvious thing that you want to be aiming for as a successful business. But what's changed recently, or what's changing?
Oh, look, I think a lot's changed in loyalty. Loyalty, it's got a few different kind of incarnations. People think about it as a loyalty program or a loyalty business or a business strategy. And it's all three of those things. And maybe they're connected together. If you're Velocity and you're the loyalty program for Virgin, that's an important part of the Virgin business strategy, as well as, how do you run a loyalty business that owns a loyalty program? So, I think what we've seen that's changed is certainly in the consumer industries, businesses with lots of customers, there's been this sort of realization that customer ecosystem development and kind of building modern audiences happens best when you have some of the mechanics that loyalty gives you. So the ability to have different propositions and to manage consent and to have levers that you don't get without some sort of proposition or program or membership. You're relying less on price and the product, and traditional forms of competing means that there's been this almost wave of proliferation. So that's been really interesting, but these waves don't stop. So a lot of what we're seeing now is these sort of waves of innovation when it comes to banks and retailers and airlines, travel companies, insurance companies, thinking about how do they modernise and win when it comes to putting together strategies that deliver those loyalty outcomes.
Many people equate loyalty to loyalty programs. That's how we often think about it in big businesses. Why is that too narrow a way of thinking about it?
Well, you don't always need a loyalty program to deliver good loyalty outcomes. When you think about a loyalty strategy, we need to think about what are the outcomes that we're looking to achieve here, and often these loyalty strategies, in fact, pretty much always connected to some sort of customer strategy. And so a business will be thinking about, where do we play? How do we win? How do we compete when it comes to, acquisition and customer retention and overall sort of customer management? And look, a lot of companies with really high levels of customer affinity and loyalty and preference don't have loyalty programs because they're winning on other dimensions. They've got a unique product. They've got a sustainable cost advantage. They've got some sort of other competitive advantage that means they compete at that level. But if you're an insurance company, a superannuation company, a bank, an airline, a retailer, many of these segments, the consumer economy now is so competitive, and it's really hard to win when it comes to dimensions that we've maybe traditionally competed around. And that's where things like membership and loyalty and other forms of value become ways that what we're seeing, these brands are now looking to build competitive advantage. So you don't have to, and often in some of our engagements, there's other strategies to build loyalty. But what we're seeing is, we in competitive markets, membership programs, loyalty programs, other sorts of published propositions are like they're the new frontier when it comes to building competitive advantage.
Yeah. So there are different. It's not obviously a loyalty program. There are different ways to hit those loyalty business outcomes that you'd be looking for.
Correct.
Just to spell that point out, what are some of those commercial outcomes that you see successful clients driving through better loyalty from customers?
Yeah. Well, look, when we think about loyalty, it is a commercial pursuit. There's a marketing aspect to it, and there's a brand aspect to it. There's the experience. It's actually quite complicated, and that's where sometimes you need a bit of help to work through it. But ultimately, it's about where's the value in the customer base, where are the value pools, and then what is the most efficient way to extract customer acquisition, frequency spend, retention, margin, lift out of your customer base. And so, I think when brands do this well, they have quite very commercial mindset that they execute against in terms of structuring their strategies and their programs against the priority customer segments and against the behaviour change that deliver the commercial outcomes they're looking for.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else you'd say about for those organisations who've really nailed this and are ahead of the pack in terms of how they approach loyalty and with the outcomes then that they're then getting? What separates them from the rest?
Like the strategy and the plan is really important, but sooner or later, strategy degenerates into work, and so execution matters a lot. And this is a long-term play. So look in banking at CBA and the other three banks. They've got a whole of bank recognition program that's very innovative. That's called Yellow. It is part of a series of things that CBA has done to go to a totally different valuation and a totally different kind of space in the market. We've gone from four big banks to one bigger bank and then the three others. And if you look at the strategies of the other three banks, publicly they're saying that they are doing things to imitate or replicate what CBA's done with things like Yellow. And so, this is an example of a bank that was really clever in terms of how do you build recognition and reward propositions that give more reasons to choose and stay with CBA. But they also connect together the bank's ecosystem, the business bank and commercial bank partners with the retail bank, with the promise of being the most cost-efficient way to acquire new customers if you're a business bank. And then if you're a consumer in that bank, you're getting really good value. So really clever. And, is the loyalty program the reason that drove the, $100 plus share price? Maybe not the whole reason, but certainly that's a component part to a winning strategy in their space.
Yeah, and I guess it works because they've looked at it as an ecosystem.
Correct.
And they've been very committed to the execution of all the parts of that ecosystem working together.
Yeah, and I think that's what modern loyalty looks like. It's about ecosystems. It's about creating, an ecosystem where you're connecting all of the things that, that matter when it comes to the customer relationship. And you're putting a moat around your customers and ensuring that whenever there's a category entry point or a need that you can meet, that you're driving preference, making it easy for them, and you're delivering other forms of value. So these modern ecosystems is where loyalty is going. And it just so happens that when you do it well, you get things like consent and you get, better permissions to be able to manage and market to the customers. So there's a sort of compounding effect, not just in, competing, but also driving sustainable asset in how you manage customers.
Yeah. Dave, I know, from your work with clients, I know it's not exclusively the case that often you're working with businesses that are in relatively low engagement categories where maybe from a customer perspective, there's not a lot of differentiation from one brand or proposition to the next. What are you seeing in terms of some of the current themes around how businesses in those sorts of categories are thinking about loyalty and how to do it differently?
Well, it's fascinating actually, because we're talking about utilities here. We're talking about low frequency, low engagement,
insurers,
long-term relationships, insurance companies, superannuation firms, a range of different insurance categories, financial services, and then even into some other forms of retail potentially. But what we're seeing in that space is probably most of the innovation actually. If you think about traditional loyalty, it was about perks and prizes. It was about like tangible rewards. What we're seeing now is that there's this real movement around kind of purpose and behavioural models around things like health. So in health insurance, there's this wave of innovation happening around health and wellbeing programs. And when it comes to your health insurance, you might look at it once a year, and then if the price goes up, you might look sideways. And it's only when you get sick that you kind of need them traditionally. Now what we're seeing is that these sort of propositions talk to the customer or the member every day. It's about rewarding you for steps. It's about incentivizing you for better behaviours, sleeping better, eating better, exercising, better mental health. And if you can capture the relationship at that dimension, and you're actually there to help the customer or the member be healthier or live better or live longer, it's a tremendous effect on the quality of the relationship, as opposed to waiting for somebody to need an ambulance.
Yeah, good for the business, also good for the actual outcomes that customer cares about.
Totally. And the bonus is actually that they live a longer life and they're healthier. And maybe we spend less money on claims and those sort of things. So, we get the kind of direct loyalty uplift, but we also get other benefits. So that's health insurance, and we could talk about health insurance a lot. But then you've got like other forms of insurance. You've got, what about home and contents? What about the car? What about other forms of insurance? Well, it's really interesting. Who's playing in the whole, we help your home be healthier? You kind of think about that. And at the moment, it's about policy variations. It's about price. It's about extra added value. But homeowners need, to ensure that their homes are safe and that they're looked after and that maintenance is taken care of. So you can kind of see, where you can kind of apply that thinking to a whole range of different contexts. And so, it's really interesting in health at the moment. There's a lot of focus there, but we're seeing some really interesting experiments and innovations across some of those other sectors. And in the case of financial services, whether it's superannuation, financial services, financial health really is like a fascinating area that we're seeing a lot of focus on. If you're a bank, if you're a superannuation firm, and you can demonstrate to the customer that they're actually, that you're actually helping them build a healthier financial life, as opposed to just, products that have low fees or, other sort of features. Again, you think about how do you win there, and how do you sort of have a customer thanking you for helping them build their financial prosperity. Structured programs and propositions play quite nicely in that space. So expect to see a lot more innovation there.
That's a trend we should watch, I guess, particularly in the Australian market, where there's a lot of competition across, some of those categories, particularly things like superannuation, where many different players, and there's a retention and engagement challenge for members.
There is, for sure. Yeah.
Tell us a bit about how Ellipsis helps with those sorts of opportunities, and how do you work with clients to deliver on them?
Yeah, well, look, we got a brilliant team, and like truly a client list that we just adore, and they come to us because they need help navigating some of the complexity when it comes to this stuff. Often it's about putting the strategy and the design and the game plan together, and it's an involved process, because it should be a one-way door. We don't want to have to walk back through because things didn't work out. And often it's a kind of multi-year kind of investment, and we're always getting our best customers in first, so the consequences of getting it wrong are high. So we help with a lot of the strategy and consulting and planning work, and that spans the proposition and the technology and the business casing and everything in between, analytics and data. But our real pedigree, and we are world leading in this area, is this topic of loyalty attribution, and this is the really important topic of having confidence around the level of investment that you're making and the incremental returns that you're getting out of those investments. And just like in marketing, sometimes it's really fuzzy when to work out a marketing attribution model. How do you isolate all of the different channels, investments that you're making to be able to kind of have confidence around how do you optimize it? Loyalty is actually more complex than that. And so we're building out, really good IP and platform and product that helps anyone with a loyalty program truly understand how it's performing and where their headroom is. And so we're really excited about that. We think that there's so many companies out there that are spending money and they're not quite sure if it's working as intended. And so the question is, do I spend less? Or maybe if I spend more, I can actually drive even better performance. So having a good game plan's right, but really making sure that you're optimizing and tracking and generating the returns is an area that we're spending a lot of time at the moment.
Okay, excellent. Fantastic. For the senior leaders who are listening to this, watching this, who are thinking about loyalty and how to get those benefits, where would you tell them to start, and what should they be prioritizing?
Where do these things start? It's a really interesting point. We've just done a big piece of work with the Flight Centre Travel Group, and they've just launched their program, World 360 Rewards, big, innovative program. And their CEO, James Kavanagh, JK, who's a wonderful CEO and has got an excellent team. He saw the opportunity to really put a proposition and a strategy together that allowed all of the different disparate parts of their business and brands and customers to sort of come together in a unified proposition. World 360 Rewards has multiple brands in it, and there's lots of really great value rewards on offer and better experiences, and that program's only going to grow and grow. But for in their context, it was about an opportunity to take a business that had $28 billion of turnover, over 30 brands, and start to think about how do you kind of piece that together? What's the connective tissue? So I think what you've got to start with, like your business, your challenge, and that opportunity. And so loyalty will often come from, we think that there's a way to do something that leverages its assets and enhances the business's, how it would compete, and ultimately stimulate a good response from a customer or customers when it comes to programs that change behaviour. Mm-hmm. So it's a kind of it's probably not a helpful answer to a really simple question, but if you think about this commercially, then you're on the right track. Loyalty needs to be more than a brand campaign, more than a marketing promotion. It really should be how you start to think about sort of audience and ecosystem development.
And start with absolute clarity on the commercial outcomes that you want to drive in your business, I guess.
Most definitely. It really is an economic sort of pursuit and a question around the identification of more revenue, more margin, and then a sort of a logical structured process to build out a game plan to extract that.
Yeah.
To put something in place that gives you something extra to drive business growth.
It's often easier inside big organizations to find new things to start than it is to have the discipline to stop things. What advice would you have for leaders in big organizations in terms of what they should stop doing when it comes to loyalty?
Look, I think one simple way to look at that is if you can't articulate the value that it's generating, if you can't connect it back to a shift in behaviour or a revenue or margin outcome, then you really need to question, is that a good investment? I think the other thing that's really interesting is the regulators got loyalty and loyalty programs in their sights. They really want to make sure that these programs don't tilt the competitive landscape unfairly, and that customer consent and their data is not being unreasonably managed. So, I think that what's really important is that you have sustainable management of your loyalty strategy and your loyalty programs from an economic standpoint, which means you need to know how much it's really costing and how much it's really generating. But they also need to be managed sustainably when it comes to how you manage the customer. And I think Australia's been pretty lucky. We've had a number of well-publicised issues inside programs around devaluations and around issues with customer data leakage and those sort of things. But when it comes to managing consent and managing a sustainable audience, we need to make sure that we're operating within the regulatory guardrails as well.
In recent years, there's been a lot of good discussion and research, marketing science on what effectiveness from marketing investment looks like, and really good solid theory on understanding how brands grow. Mm. How do your views and approaches on driving customer loyalty connect with those lines of thinking?
Yeah. Again, have we got an hour? Let's do it. Let's do the kind of the light version. But that's a fascinating topic because you have a whole I think a modernization of the way that marketers think about growing your brand and the laws of marketing, I think, are being more and more accepted. And there's a challenge around that, which is, loyalty programs go against some of those laws. And I think that's actually not true. I think it's a great way to build headlines. And if you get loyalty wrong, you could be wasting money. But our view is that actually the laws of loyalty and the laws of loyalty science are actually very connected into what we're seeing with what Ehrenberg, Bass and others are saying when it comes to how do you grow your brand. We know that building mental availability and physical availability are an important part of brand growth. We know that you can't retain your way to growth. You need to always constantly be acquiring. When we think about how do you kind of build mental availability, building those mental habits that sort of put you into the top of that repertoire of brands that the customer will consider when there's a category entry point. Hey, I need to go on a holiday, or I've got a business trip, or I'm feeling a bit like I need a wardrobe upgrade. Loyalty and loyalty programs can play a very important role in those mental structures that get built to establish the repertoire of brands and actually to drive preference. So without a program, we're relying on lots of investment in brand and experience and price, value, a whole range of factors. But if you have a really good program proposition, other forms of value, if you're using the program to drive engagement with your brand, what we see quite clearly through the loyalty science, which connects back to the marketing science, is loyalty helps you win when it comes to preference, when it comes to not only building the mental models, but winning in that repertoire of brands when the category entry point moment emerges. It's fantastic that kind of loyalty science and marketing science are coming together. At the moment, they're still, I think, they're seen as sort of like maybe two opposing forces, but certainly what we're seeing is that you can grow your brand by being a better marketer, by building your brand more effectively and accelerating that through your loyalty strategy.
So to the challengers who would take maybe an opposing view to you, what would you say to those people who would say things like, there's no such thing as customer loyalty?
I think that they're just wrong. I think that we all have reasons why we prefer brands, and whether it's price or whether it's location or whether it's some sort of other behavioral science factor, loyalty in consumer economies is a real thing. I think that there are statements like, it's cheaper to retain a customer than acquire a new one. That's maybe not true. Maybe we thought that used to be true. And certainly we agree that you need to constantly be acquiring lots of new light buyers into your business to be able to continue to grow. Loyalty programs used to be something that worked for retention, but now these modern propositions and programs work really well when it comes to new customer acquisition.
Yeah. And that's where there is alignment with how brands grow.
That's right. Yeah.
Research. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What else does loyalty give you as a business?
Great question. So direct value is sell more to more customers more often at better margins. We all want to do that. What we're seeing is things like retail media networks, things like the creation of data assets that give you permission to do more personalization and relevant marketing, as well as run your business better, network and store optimization and so forth, are all byproducts, if you like, of running a loyalty business or a loyalty program. What we're seeing though is actually a healthy loyalty business, an engaged audience with pretty high penetration and permission rates are actually the kind of like foundation. They're like the infrastructure that drives a lot of new modern ways of marketing and managing customers. So Woolies has got $500 million or more of income coming through its retail media network through Cartology, and there's a range of other businesses that are moving into that, retail media space, which requires really good data and marketing capabilities. So what loyalty gives you is those capabilities, but what it requires then is that you run it sustainably, because the quality of your data asset, the quality of your retail media asset is driven by the quality of the audience that you're continually building. So, there's a kind of reinforcing kind of
things all work together.
That's right. The better the loyalty program performs, the more direct value you're getting, the better data asset that you get that you can monetize in a range of different other ways. So there's a kind of compounding effect there that means that, brands that do this really well accelerate. They get an exponential lift in terms of business performance.
So this discussion has been a very commercially grounded one, which is absolutely what it should be in terms of why you'd want customer loyalty in your business. But can loyalty initiatives also drive real positive outcomes for customers and communities? And what does that look like?
Most definitely, and they should. I mean, we've had a sort of fairly commercially sort of focused conversation here around the kind of loyalty economics and the case for loyalty as a economic driver, but customers don't care about that. Like they care about other things like the product and purpose and brand and all and how the social license that their brands kind of have to operate. And so if you are a insurance company or a bank or a retailer or any brand, and you're thinking about how do you connect with the customer, how do you be relevant to them, how do you actually build the brand with them, community and and purpose are really important. So I think that's where we're seeing in the case of insurance, there's a lot of community partnerships. In the case of some of the big health insurers, part of their health and wellbeing programs are rewards and incentives for community causes and raising money and converting your points to charity. So I think that there's a lot of programs out there that are trying to play in that space. Grilled, whenever you buy a burger at Grilled, they give you a coin and you go over and you decide which community cause you want that sort of portion of your spend to go to. So they're partnering with local organisations. But it's really interesting now what we're seeing, and a bit of a radical cause, but I think it's fascinating. The data that comes out of the Boots loyalty program in the UK is being used by researchers to be able to do things like find cure to cancer and health causes, because what they can do is that they can connect the customer with a whole lot of lifestyle and other data points that give them a much more comprehensive data set to be able to conduct analysis, to conduct research. So how good's that we're kind of delivering great business outcomes, but we're also engaging with customers in things that are important to them, but also there's a humanity aspect to this as well. It's not just about driving market cap. We need to think about sustainable businesses and sustainable communities, and that's the next conversation where we can talk less about the numbers and more about purpose and some great initiatives out there that our clients and others are going after in this space.
David, this has been a really interesting, useful conversation in terms of unpacking how to think about loyalty inside big businesses, and I particularly appreciate the reframe around don't take the narrow focus on loyalty programs, but think about how you engender loyalty more broadly through your business and that ecosystem thinking that you talked about. So really valuable conversation. Thank you so much for making time.
Thanks, Robin. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Want access to the best specialist marketing and digital services? Check out Studio Space, the agency marketplace and procurement solution that gives big brands a faster, simpler, and more flexible way to access the most extraordinary agencies.